Move. That's all I said. One word. Direct. No room for confusion. But the man sitting next to Lindsay, tall, tan, grinning like he knew something I didn't flinch. He looked up from his whiskey, eyebrows raised like I'd interrupted a private joke. "I'm good right here," he said, then turned back toward my wife, casually resting his arm along the back of the couch, right behind her neck. My wife. "Jason, don't," Lindsay said quietly, without looking at either of us. Jason. So that's his name. The way she said it. Low. Familiar. It hit me like a shove in the chest. I took a slow step forward, placing myself between them and the rest of the party. Voices buzzed behind us, soft jazz, clinking glasses, forced laughter from people pretending not to see the drama unraveling in the center of the room. "Get up," I said again, jaw clenched. "You're in my seat." Jason chuckled, glanced at Lindsay, and then looked back at me with a condescending tilt of his head. "Didn't realize you had a nameplate on it." Lindsay sipped her wine, red, always red, and stared out the window like this wasn't happening. I turned to her. "Linz, seriously?" She still didn't meet my eyes. "You're making a scene, David." "A scene?" My voice was low, measured. His was smug. And she was acting like this was some awkward misunderstanding at a dinner party. "Why is this guy so comfortable next to you?" I asked, eyes locked on her. "Why does he act like he's been here before?" "Because I have," Jason cut in, smirking. That was it. I stepped in closer, close enough to smell the cologne he'd probably drowned himself in. "You need to leave. Now." He didn't move. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low enough for only us to hear. "She didn't ask me to leave. You did. There's a difference." I looked at Lindsay again. She finally met my gaze, but it wasn't warm or embarrassed. It was cold, resigned. "He's a friend," she said. "From my gym." "You're overreacting." I laughed under my breath. "If he's just a friend, why is he testing me like this?" Jason raised his glass in mock toast. "Because you make it so easy." The rage in me pulsed hot and fast. My fists balled, my heart thundered. But I didn't swing. I didn't shout. I stepped back. Not because I was scared, because I suddenly understood what this was. This wasn't just about Jason. This was about Lindsay. She could have shut it down. Could have said one word, enough. Could have stood up. Walked away. Instead, she sat there. Watching. Waiting. Letting it happen. Can you imagine standing in a room full of people, watching your wife choose silence while another man dares you to act? Before all this, I lived in a world of clean lines and concrete truth. I designed homes for a living. Spaces that made sense, that stayed put. Predictable. Solid. I woke at 6:15 every morning. Coffee black. Briefcase, left hand. Kisses on the cheek, always the right one. I believed in structure and loyalty, in knowing who you were coming home to. But that night, under the dim string lights of a Portland living room, I realized something chilling. You can build the perfect house, but you still can't stop someone from opening the wrong door. And someone already had. The silence in the car on the ride home wasn't peaceful. It was tactical. She stared out the passenger window, arms folded tight. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, every turn echoing louder than it should have. I wasn't sure what stung more, Jason's smugness or Lindsay's silence. I didn't say a word until we got to the driveway. But even then, I waited. Inside, the kitchen light cast a soft yellow glow across the counter. Familiar. Comfortable. Deceiving. Lindsay kicked off her heels like nothing had happened. I stood by the door, keys still in hand, heart still pulsing from the party. "So," I finally said, carefully placing the keys in the bowl by the door. "Are we going to talk about that?" She poured herself another glass of wine. Not a question, just a continuation. Like this was just another Thursday night. "What's there to talk about?" she said, turning her back to me. I almost laughed. "Lindsay, come on. That guy disrespected me in front of everyone. And you let him." She turned, slow, deliberate, glass in hand, eyes narrowed just slightly. "I let him? You didn't say anything. You didn't stop him. You sat there like I was the one ruining the evening." "I sat there," she snapped, "because I didn't want to escalate a situation that didn't need to be a situation. You acted like a territorial teenager." I stepped forward, voice dropping. "You think that's what this is? Territorial? This is about respect. About boundaries." She scoffed. "Jason is a friend. From my gym. That's all. You just couldn't handle someone else getting 5 minutes of my attention." 5 minutes? My throat tightened. Do friends usually wrap their arm behind you on a couch? Or smile like they know something your husband doesn't? She flinched, barely, but I caught it. A flicker of guilt, maybe, or something else. But she buried it quickly behind a sip of wine. You're reading too much into it, she said, turning away again. No, I said firmly. I'm seeing it exactly as it is. And the way you defended him? The way you didn't defend me? That's not normal, Lindsay. She leaned against the counter, arms now crossed, glass tucked against her chest like a shield. You've been off lately anyway. Maybe I didn't want to deal with another one of your moods. That hit harder than it should have. What moods? You mean the ones that show up when something feels wrong? She didn't answer, just stared at the cabinets like the wood grain was fascinating. You didn't even look at me, Lindsay. Not once. Not during the whole thing. That's not just politeness, that's avoidance. A pause. Heavy. Then she whispered, because I knew you'd blow it out of proportion. There it was. The flip. The guilt trip. The slow unraveling of the narrative until I was the problem. I didn't say anything for a while. Just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my trust cracking. She turned and walked out without another word, wine glass in hand. Her footsteps up the stairs echoed like an exit cue. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot she'd stood. The air still held her perfume, sweet, expensive, rehearsed. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, mind still cycling through the same 3 images, Jason's smirk, Lindsay's silence, and the wine glass between them like a line I wasn't allowed to cross. She hadn't spoken a word to me. She left early. No goodbye, no glance. That was fine, because I had something to do. It took 15 minutes to find him. Social media makes it easy these days. Lindsay followed him on 2 platforms. From there, a few mutual likes, a few gym-tagged photos, and 1 shared backyard barbecue from last summer. I had his address by 10 a.m. I didn't rush. I didn't seethe. I just drove. He lived in a cul-de-sac outside Portland. Modern build. Well-kept lawn. Wind chimes. I parked across the street, took a long breath, and walked up the driveway. He was in the backyard, shirtless, watering something in a raised bed like he was starring in his own fitness commercial. Of course he was. He saw me before I spoke. The hose lowered. That smug little grin returned. Well, he said, cocking his head. Look who decided to drop by. I stepped onto the deck, stopping just short of him. We're going to make this simple. He laughed. You always talk like you're a lawyer or something. Is this where you say I'm trespassing on emotional property? My jaw tightened. I didn't rise to it. You stay away from Lindsay. You stay away from my house. And if I ever see you near her again, we'll have a very different conversation. He didn't move, just squinted into the sun like I was a minor inconvenience. You really think she's not going to talk to me because you stomped over here like some 1950s husband? She will, I said calmly. She'll test the line. That's what people do. But I'm telling you, if I see you cross it again, it won't be a conversation next time. Jason smirked, but I saw it, the subtle shift in his stance. A flicker of unease beneath the performance. He didn't expect this version of me. Not the calm one. He took a step closer. You really think she's not already? I moved faster than he expected. His fist came first, wild, careless. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist mid-swing, and with one sharp pivot, put him flat on his back. Hard. His shoulder thudded against the deck, his breath catching. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at him. I just straightened my shirt, turned, and walked back toward the gate. Behind me, I heard him groan, dragging himself up, probably wondering how the hell a quiet guy like me flipped him like that without blinking. The truth? I've been holding things in for years. You ever feel that kind of silence inside you? The kind that doesn't explode, but sharpens? By the time I got back to the car, my pulse had already settled. My hands weren't shaking. I felt clear, not proud, not vindicated, just done. Done with being made to feel like a stranger in my own life. Done with letting Lindsay dictate the version of reality we live in. And definitely done with pretending Jason was anything other than a problem I needed to solve. The house was quiet when I got home. I didn't wait for an apology. I wasn't expecting one, because I'd finally started seeing things for what they were, not what I wanted them to be. She was waiting for me when I got home, not just in the house. She was standing dead center in the living room, arms folded, feet planted, like she'd been rehearsing this showdown in her head all day. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt the tension wrap around me like a wire pulled taut. You assaulted him, she said before I even closed the door. I paused. I wouldn't call it that. Then what would you call it? She snapped, eyes flaring. Because Jason just sent me a photo of the bruise on his back and said you threw him to the ground. I did, I said flatly, kicking off my shoes. After he tried to swing at me. Lindsay let out a bitter, stunned laugh. You think that makes it better? I think it makes it honest. She stared at me for a long moment, her jaw tight, her breathing shallow. I could see her fighting for the next line, trying to hold on to whatever thread of control she still thought she had. You had no right. I had every right, I said, stepping forward, voice even. He disrespected me in my own space, in front of people we know. You didn't say a word to stop him, so I did. By driving to his house and throwing him to the ground like a man who's done being embarrassed by his own wife, I cut in. That did it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a flicker of shock. Then anger. You think I'm the one who embarrassed you? She whispered. I know it. She shook her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You've lost it. No, I said. I've finally found some clarity. She walked past me, pacing now. The wine was gone. Tonight she was running on adrenaline and damage control. You need to call him, she said firmly. Apologize. I actually smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Not happening. Her voice rose. David, he could press charges. Let him, I said. We both know he won't. And what if he does? Then he'll have to explain why he tried to punch me in his own backyard after I asked him to stay away from my wife. Lindsay's eyes narrowed. You're twisting this. You think this makes you the victim? No, I said quietly. I think it makes me the husband who finally stopped asking nicely. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. And maybe she didn't. Maybe that was the point. She scoffed, walking away toward the hallway, her voice trailing back cold as steel. You're sleeping in the guest room. I didn't respond. Not because I agreed, but because I was done negotiating. Have you ever reached that point in a relationship where the silence after an argument doesn't hurt anymore? Where the distance becomes a kind of peace? That night, I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. The bed smelled like detergent and linen, not perfume and memory. And I liked it that way. No games. No accusations. No carefully crafted silences. Just space. I heard her footsteps in the hallway once. They paused outside the door, then moved on. That, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just angry. She was recalculating. It started with a manila envelope. Unmarked, inconspicuous, left on the porch by the private investigator I'd hired 3 weeks earlier. I didn't even open it right away. I just stood there for a long moment, envelope in hand, staring at the grain of the front door like it might blink first. Hiring him hadn't been a proud moment. It had felt like crossing some invisible line from trust into suspicion. But I wasn't running on paranoia anymore. I was running on instinct. And that instinct was sharp now. Cold. Focused. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table, the same place Lindsay and I used to sip Sunday coffee and talk about our week like we were planning a future. Inside were a few printed photos. Nothing damning. Jason at a grocery store. Jason at his front yard with a golden retriever. Jason holding hands with a woman outside an airport. The caption beneath that one stopped me cold. Rachel Grayson, spouse. Returned from a 2-month overseas consulting assignment in early March. Rachel. Jason had a wife. A wife who'd only just come home. I read the report again. It detailed Jason's movements, casual gym visits, flirty cafe conversations, and one particularly uncomfortable pattern. A long list of women he'd been known to charm. No concrete evidence of an affair with Lindsay. No hotel receipts. No late-night photos. Just circumstantial trails. Patterns. Timing. And her name was never far from his timeline. I sat there a long time, letting it all seep in. The irony that the man who had invaded my marriage had one of his own. That somewhere out there, Rachel was living in the same haunting ambiguity I was. Or worse, still blissfully unaware. The detective's final note was circled in red. Client advised to proceed with caution. Subject may escalate behavior if confronted. That didn't scare me. If anything, it sharpened my resolve. I pushed the papers aside and stared out the window. A breeze moved through the maple tree in our yard, rattling its orange leaves. Portland in mid-fall. The kind of weather that felt both familiar and foreboding. Lindsay was out. Where exactly, she hadn't said. She rarely did these days. Said she needed space. That things had been tense. As if I hadn't noticed. She'd been quieter than usual since the Jason incident. But not apologetic. Just performative. Making dinner. Leaving out my favorite mug. Asking small questions with that overly casual tone that only raised more alarms. It was like watching someone repair a wall they'd already punched a hole through, with makeup and glue instead of bricks. That night, she made roasted salmon. Lit a candle. Sat across from me at the dinner table like we were fine. I was thinking, she said, slicing into her food without meeting my eyes. Maybe we should take a weekend. Get away. I looked at her. Really looked. Her nails were freshly done. She'd worn mascara. Her shoulders were a little too straight. Why now? She blinked. Why not? I almost asked her outright. Did you know Jason was married? Did you care? Instead, I said nothing. Just cut my food. Chewed slowly. Let the silence thicken. She filled it with forced calm. You've been distant. I finally met her eyes. Have I? She faltered for half a breath. Then picked up her wine glass. You know what I mean. I set my fork down. Do you ever think about honesty, Lindsay? The glass paused midair. What do you mean? I mean the kind that doesn't come with disclaimers. Or excuses. Just the truth. Clean. She tilted her head slightly. That's a loaded question. Is it? Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I leaned back. Jason's married. That got her. Her eyes widened, barely, but enough. Then came the hesitation. The half-second delay that reveals more than words ever could. I didn't know that, she said finally, too measured. And I knew she was lying. Not because of the words, but because of the voice behind them. There's a kind of stillness when someone tries to sound surprised. Like they're waiting to see how much you already know. I nodded slowly. Of course. We finished dinner in silence. But inside, I wasn't eating anymore. I was calculating. Because the truth wasn't just circling me anymore. It was closing in. I wasn't sure what I expected from her. Rachel Grayson opened the door in sweats and a headband. Her hair pulled back like she hadn't planned to be seen. Her eyes were tired, cautious. But she smiled, polite and unsure. You're David? She asked. I nodded. We need to talk. She hesitated for just a second, then stepped aside and let me in. The place smelled like cinnamon and pine, like someone trying really hard to make something feel like home again. Family photos lined the walls. Her and Jason at beaches, birthdays, barbecues. I wondered how many of them were real smiles. We sat in her living room. She tucked one foot under her leg and folded her arms across her stomach like she was bracing herself. I'm not here to make accusations, I said, pulling the envelope from my coat pocket. But I think you deserve to see this. She took the photos slowly, one by one. Jason with women. Jason at the gym. Jason laughing too close to someone not her. And then, Jason and Lindsay. Not kissing, but close enough. In a parking lot, her hand resting on his chest. His leaning down, whispering something in her ear. She was smiling. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. When was this? 3 weeks ago. Her lips pressed tight, holding back something raw. I figured, she whispered. He was different when I came home. Distant. But I thought it was just stress. I nodded once. I told myself the same thing. She ran her fingers over the photo like she was tracing cracks in her life. Then, without another word, she stood up and walked to the front door. Where are you? She didn't answer. Just grabbed her keys, threw on a jacket, and motioned for me to follow. We drove in silence. I didn't plan to go in. I just wanted her to know. But when we pulled into the driveway, and she slammed the car into park, I knew this wasn't going to be quiet. Jason opened the door with a beer in his hand and a surprised look that turned sour the moment he saw me behind her. Rachel, he said, trying to smile. What's? She threw the envelope at his chest. Tell me again how you spent last Tuesday night, she snapped. He caught the photos as they scattered onto the floor. What is this? He asked, eyes darting from her to me. You tell me, she spat. He glanced at one photo, then at me. You brought him to my house. I brought the truth, she shot back. Jason scoffed, turning to me. You've got some nerve, man. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Rachel stepped closer, voice trembling. I was gone for 2 months, Jason. 2 months. And this is how you spend your freedom? Nothing happened, he said quickly. It was a flirt. That's it. Don't lie to me. He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. You are unbelievable. Rachel, come on, she didn't wait. She picked up a glass from the counter and threw it against the wall. It shattered, loud and sharp, echoing through the house like a bomb. "Get out," she said. His jaw dropped. "This is my house. No, it's ours. And tonight, I'm changing the locks." I turned to leave then. My part was done. But as I stepped outside, I heard her voice rise one last time. "I should have never trusted you with something as fragile as loyalty." The door slammed behind me. And just like that, a house I had never entered became the site of a reckoning that felt long overdue. That evening, the house felt colder than usual. Not the kind of cold that comes from weather or drafts. The kind that seeps in when truth brushes the edges of denial and no one wants to name it. She was sitting on the couch, legs folded under her, thumbing through a book she clearly wasn't reading. A mug sat on the table in front of her, untouched, steam long gone. She looked up when I walked in, like she'd heard something shift in the air. "Hey," she said. I didn't respond. I just hung up my coat, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. My hands were steady. My mind wasn't. When I finally turned to face her, I didn't sit. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Watching. "You hear about Jason?" I asked, casual as smoke. Her eyes twitched. "What about him?" "He's got a wife. Rachel. She just got back from a long trip." Lindsay blinked. The pause between question and reaction stretched just a beat too long. "I didn't know that," she said. It was the way she said it. Too neutral, too clean. Like a sentence scrubbed of any emotional fingerprints. I took a sip of water. "You sure?" She set the book down slowly, fingers flattening the pages. "Why would I lie about that?" I tilted my head. "You tell me." Her lips parted, about to deflect, to argue, but then she shut them. Her eyes flicked toward the window, like there was something more interesting out in the dark than right here with me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Did something happen between you two?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "Seriously?" "Yeah, seriously." Her mouth twisted into something between irritation and disbelief. "No, nothing happened. And I can't believe you'd even ask me that." "I'm not asking because I want to start a fight," I said. "I'm asking because I saw your face just now, and it wasn't surprise. It was fear." Her jaw clenched. "You're imagining things." I nodded slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Maybe." I let the silence stretch. She hated that. Always had. Lindsay was a master of steering the conversation, of filling the gaps with pleasant noise. But when I gave her nothing, she floundered. "What are you trying to get at, David?" she finally asked, voice trembling slightly. "That I had an affair? That I did something behind your back?" I didn't answer right away, just studied her. The way her hands curled around the cushion beside her. The way she couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second at a time. Then I said it. "Did you?" Her face paled. Not dramatically, just enough that it made my stomach tighten. "No," she whispered. But her eyes didn't follow the word. I looked down, exhaled, nodded once. Okay, she repeated, voice rising. "That's it?" I asked. "You answered. And you don't believe me." "I don't know what I believe anymore." She stood suddenly, arms flung to her sides. "I'm not doing this, David. I'm not going to be put on trial every time I talk to someone you don't like." "I don't care who you talk to," I said, voice calm. "I care about the version of you that shows up when I ask simple questions." That stopped her. For a moment, the fury faded, and what was left was something closer to guilt. Or grief. Maybe both. She sat back down, this time slower, eyes dropping to her lap. I waited. She didn't speak again. Neither did I. We just sat there in the same room, breathing the same air, worlds apart. The next morning, she made pancakes. Not just boxed mix. Real ones. From scratch. Blueberries folded into the batter, the way I liked them. The smell hit me the second I came down the stairs. Warm, sweet, familiar. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed the last month. She stood at the stove in an apron I hadn't seen in years, humming softly under her breath. "Morning," she said with a small smile, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. I paused in the doorway. "Morning." She plated 3 pancakes, dusted them with powdered sugar, and slid them in front of me without missing a beat. Fresh coffees in the pot. I sat down slowly, fork in hand, but I didn't take a bite, because none of it felt real. For days after that, she became different, not just nicer, attentive, gentle, too gentle. She'd greet me at the door when I came home from work, arms slipping around my waist, asking about my day. She laughed at my old jokes, touched my shoulder in passing, left folded laundry on my side of the bed with a note. Thought you'd want these fresh. She wore the perfume I once told her reminded me of the first time we met. She made lasagna on a Wednesday. She queued up my favorite show without asking. She didn't mention Jason. Not once. And neither did I. Because I knew exactly what this was. It was peace. But not the safe kind. It was the kind of peace that comes after a storm. Not because the clouds are gone, but because the eye of it has moved right above you. I watched her more than I listened. The way she'd carefully wiped the counters twice. The way her eyes lingered on mine, then drifted away like she was making sure I hadn't looked too long. She started going to bed early. Always tired. Always before me. And when I joined her later, she was already curled toward the wall. I tested it one night. Came in quietly, sat on the edge of the bed without saying a word. Her breath changed. She wasn't asleep. Still, she didn't move. I stared at her back and wondered how long she could hold a pose. She was good at this. At making the show look effortless. But I knew better. Because every time I tried to bring up the past month, she redirected. If I asked about the gym, she'd mention a new class she wanted to try. If I mentioned Rachel's name, once, she just blinked and said, "I feel terrible for her," before changing the subject to something about weekend plans. And I let her. Because silence, in its own way, reveals everything. She started texting me during the day again. Little things. Hope your meeting went okay. Want me to make dinner tonight or order in? Just thinking of you. I'd reply, meeting went fine. Let's do takeout. You too. But I kept the words short. The surface smooth. Because I was watching. That Sunday, she brought home a bottle of my favorite scotch. Just appeared with it in her hands like she'd remembered all on her own. I thought we could have a night in, she said, pressing it into my palms. Just the two of us. I nodded. Sounds nice. We sat on the couch, the TV playing quietly, sipping in silence. She leaned into me, rested her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "I've missed this." I said nothing, because I had. But not this version. Not the curated, polished performance. I missed the woman who'd challenged me, who used to love in a way that didn't feel like strategy. And now? Now, every kindness had a thread running beneath it. A question I wasn't supposed to ask. A truth I wasn't supposed to pursue. But I wasn't fooled. I was patient. Because peace like this, it never lasts. I wasn't looking for it. That's what made it worse. I was sorting through our shared cloud drive, just cleaning up folders before syncing them to a new external hard drive. Tax documents, vacation photos, scanned receipts. Mundane, innocent stuff. Then I saw it. A folder buried 4 levels deep under a mislabeled title. Home Reno Plans, 2021, Archive. We never renovated anything in 2021. Curious, I clicked it open. There was only one file inside. A video. Just 38 seconds long. No title. No timestamp. Just a grainy thumbnail of a hotel room wall. I hovered for a moment, finger over the trackpad. Something in me said don't. Another part said you already know. I clicked play. The clip opened mid-laughter. Jason's laugh. Distinct, irritating, familiar. The camera shook slightly, like it had been set down on a nightstand without much thought. Lindsay stepped into frame from the left, wearing a robe that slipped down one shoulder. Jason's hand reached for her waist. They kissed. Not a polite, passing kiss. The kind of kiss that's been practiced. The kind you don't give unless you've given it more than once. Her hand slid behind his neck. She smiled. He whispered something in her ear that made her giggle. I didn't hear the words. I didn't want to. I paused the video. Deleted it. Not because I couldn't bear to see the rest, but because I didn't need to. The confirmation wasn't in the kiss. It was in her eyes. I sat there for a long time. No tears. No shouting. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that happens when the war inside you ends. Not because you won, but because there's nothing left to fight for. Outside, the wind rustled the tree branches. Inside, I stared at the front door like I expected something, or someone, to walk through it and explain. But there was nothing left to explain. The truth didn't scream. It sat in silence. Exactly like she had that night at the party. Exactly like I was now. She walked through the front door just after 6, still wearing her work blazer, one hand full of grocery bags, the other texting someone without looking up. I was already sitting at the table, waiting. She glanced up, startled. "Hey," she said, smiling too quickly. "I got that yogurt you like. And some of that rosemary bread from, I saw the video." The words dropped between us like glass shattering. She froze. Her bag slipped from her hand and landed on the floor with a dull thud. Apples rolled out across the tile. She didn't pick them up. "What?" she said softly. "You know what?" The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like her brain was flipping through pages for the right script and coming up blank. "I didn't mean," she whispered. "Don't." Tears welled instantly. That caught me off guard. Not the tears themselves, but how fast they came. Like she'd been storing them. Like she'd always known this day was waiting. Her voice broke. "I didn't want you to find that." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes locked on hers. "But you recorded it. You saved it. You tucked it into our shared drive." She covered her mouth with one hand and sobbed, shaking her head violently. I don't know why I did. I wasn't thinking. I didn't want it to mean anything, but it does." She collapsed onto the floor next to the fallen apples, hands trembling, mascara smudging. "It was just once," she choked. "I swear. Just that once. It was a mistake, David. A stupid, impulsive mistake." I didn't flinch. "You kissed him at that party." She nodded, crying harder. "It was after that night. After everything. I felt so disconnected from you, and Jason said all the right things, and I lost myself for a minute." A minute doesn't end up in a hotel room. She looked up at me, face streaked with tears, voice hoarse. "I was scared. After it happened, I thought I ruined everything. I didn't know how to tell you, so I tried to fix it by pretending it hadn't happened. I was going to delete the video. I just didn't want to forget the moment long enough to know I'd never go back to it." "That's poetic," I said, voice flat. "But it doesn't fix anything." She crawled toward me, stopping just at the edge of the rug. "David, please. I love you. I don't want this to end. We can go to therapy. We can start over. You're my best friend." I looked down at her. This woman who'd once been the center of my world and felt nothing but emptiness. "You already ended it, Lindsay," I said. "You just didn't tell me." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back gently. Her breath hitched. I stood, walked to the sink, poured out the glass of water I hadn't touched, rinsed it slowly. Precisely. Behind me, she was still crying. Still hoping. I dried the glass, set it down, then turned. "It's over," I said quietly. She sobbed into her palms, shoulders shaking. I didn't stay to console her. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the moment, out of whatever remained of us. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet for a room full of broken things. Divorce hearings aren't dramatic. There's no gavel slam, no shouts or surprise evidence. Just signatures, spreadsheets, and someone in a robe stating, flatly, what used to be love and is now legally classified as property. The judge didn't mention the video. There was no legal proof of infidelity. Just irreconcilable differences, filed neatly in digital ink. Lindsay sat across from me, her hair pinned back, face pale and rigid. She didn't look at me during the proceedings. Not once. When it was over, she followed me outside into the gray Portland air, her heels clicking softly behind me. "David," she said, voice small. I kept walking. "Please, just a minute." I stopped, turned, waited. She took a step closer. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I never stopped loving you. I just got lost." I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in weeks. There was no anger left. No fire. Just ashes. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. This time, she didn't follow. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, I pulled out my phone. One new message. It was from Rachel. "Coffee sometime. Just to talk. No pressure." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew this wasn't a beginning. Not yet. But it could be something else. A conversation. A breath of fresh air. A meeting of two people who had been shattered by the same storm. "Sure," I typed back. "Let me know when." I hit send, slid the phone into my coat pocket, and walked into the rest of my life. No soundtrack. No parade. Just quiet steps. And finally, clarity. When David deleted the video without watching it through, did he protect his peace or run from the full truth? Drop your take in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that cut deep.
What I've learned, protein is your best friend. And if you are not, when I started tracking my protein, I noticed I was eating like half the amount of protein that I should. And I was like, no wonder it's so hard for me to gain muscle. I'm not eating near the amount of protein that I should be eating to build muscle. And so when you increase your protein, it's also very satiating. You feel like you're going to eat a lot. So you're not like grazing all the time because you feel like you're eating a large amount of food. That is what allows you to build lean mass. Without the protein, you're not going to build lean mass. Your diet and your exercise have to both be dialed in order for you to ultimately see muscle growth and physical results.
So what do you think the right amount of protein is? Is there like a scale that you live and die by?
For me, and again, different experts say different things, and I'm never giving nutrition advice, but for me, what's worked is I try to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, if people are trying to lose weight, that's going to be, and they have a lot of weight to lose, that's going to be a lot of protein. So what experts I've heard say is 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. You can go as low as like 0.75 grams per pound. But I like to shoot on the higher end because then on the weekends when I'm probably not getting as much, I'm like a little looser with my nutrition, then it kind of evens out a little bit. But for me, I have a hard time. I know, Lauren, you've said you have a hard time building muscle. I have a hard time building muscle. So I feel like I have to be on the higher end of that protein scale in order for anything to happen in my body.
So let's say like just like a rough example of some, and I know that, again, this is not your area of expertise, but if you wanted like 130 grams of protein, like what are some examples of what you would eat throughout a day? Because I think sometimes we've talked about it on the show and people write in and say, well, like that's a lot of protein. Like how do you even get that much protein?
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. Like I try to eat the whole foods. I try to do, like I do a lot of shrimp, chicken. I eat all the meats. I eat a lot of Greek yogurt. I eat a lot of cottage cheese. I do smoothies, but I'm not going to lie. Like it is hard and I'm busy. I'm running a business and I do a lot of protein powder, honestly, or I'll